First of all, I'm going to give a short and brief overview of the Belt and Road Initiative. Since it's just an overview, so I will not use too many facts and numbers. And then I will explain a little bit about my approach to seeing the Belt and Road Initiative from the eyes of a tax researcher. And the next two perspectives will be to evaluate the changes in terms of the China's tax treaties and also the China's domestic tax laws. And the final part will be the conclusion. Well, the Belt and Road Initiative was proposed by President Xi Jinping in 2013. And the belt is meant for the Silk Route economical belt, and the road is meant for the 21st century maritime Silk Route. And, well, people may say, as you can see the name here, I use a bracket to say, in the past it is called the New Silk Route Economical Belt or the One Belt, One Road initiative. So it is just since 2015 we have finally an official translation of from Chinese name of Belt and Road Initiative. Well, people might wonder, are there any old or ancient Belt routes or the Silk Route? Yes, my answer is yes. As you can see on the right side, the picture is it's called a Silk Route monument located in Kazakhstan. And in general, the Silk Route has already been credited by UNESCO as a World Heritage. So apart from the economical significance of the Silk Routes, it also has a rich context and significance of culture. And this picture is just to show where the Belt and the routes passed in the world map. The red line is for the belts, and the blue line is for the routes on the ocean. We just need to note where it is, because I'll have later on more pictures about it. And also here I pasted 3 diagrams to show the portions of China and the countries along the belts and the routes in terms of their portions of GDP, population, and trade. And these numbers are as of 2018. Well, the orange area is the countries along the belts and routes. And the blue area is for China. So taken together, we can see that they have take a significant part of the world, either in terms of GDP, population, and trade. So for EU-China trade relationship, I also added a diagram to show, interestingly, about a train which is called China Railway Express. And in Chinese, it's actually China-EU train. And this train is responsible for transporting goods, including not only the silk, but also the electronics and mechanical products back and forth between China and EU. So we can see that for the number of 2018, we see that compared to 2013, the number of yearly dispatched train has grown nearly 80 times in 5 years. And the number of train for 2011 is only 17. So you can imagine how fast this EU-China trade has grown. And with, of course, it's just a perspective. And then for this slide, I want to explain how I see the Belt and Road Initiative from the perspective of a tax researcher. Well, I named this approach as same bigger. However, after listening to the conversation earlier, I think this approach is still too narrow compared to your speech. But yeah, I will stick to it because I have no time to think about it. Well, what I mean say bigger is, well, I will investigate the changes covering from the time from 2013 to 2018, which is the first 5 years of the BRI. And I will survey the changes from the perspective of the tax treaties that China has signed, and also the domestic tax laws of China. And also, another special thing I want to remind you is about to seeing against the background. The background is in between the first 5 years of the Belt and Road Initiative. China has transformed from a capital importer to a net capital exporter, which is a change, I think, which is very profound for the implications for many areas of China's law. And here I listed only one area, which is called China's Outbound Investment Regulation, which has been reformed and reshaped by the two rules listed here, respectively in 2017 and 2018. And taken together, these two rules have make not only our outbound investment regulation not only tightened but also smoother and also more normative. But this is just like an opening speech. Well, the following will be focusing on the tax perspective. As I said, I will survey the changes, first of all, from the treaty perspective. And here I used actually three maps, the world map. The first map is about the countries signing the tax treaties with China. The green area is, of course, those countries, and the red part is, of course, China. As you can see on this map, the green area, the China's tax treaty partners has covered a majority part of the world. And in the number, China has signed till now tax treaties with 109 countries around the world. And actually, China's tax treaties already, the network has already been the third largest in the world. The number for the US is like 85, for the UK is 150. And the second map is about the countries, I call it the countries, the BRI countries. The BRI countries, I define it in a different way than the countries along the Belt and Roads, because as you can see, the green area are the countries have signed the BRI agreements, called BRI cooperation agreements with China. So those countries are not merely along the original designed Belt and Roads, as you can see in this map, especially in Africa, which is pretty obvious. So in terms of number, China has signed BRI cooperation documents with 123 countries in the world. Well, a few days ago, 2 days ago, the number is still 122. And actually, just yesterday, I painted the Italy into green area rather than empty area because, as we all know, Italy officially joined the BRI. And in terms of the nature of this cooperation document, they are more in the nature of political commitments rather than material investment agreements, which is to express the state's political willingness to participate in the BRI. So in this map, we see the green area, the BRI countries. The initiative has covered most of Africa and most of Asia. And in terms of EU, especially in Central and Eastern Europe, there are already 24 countries joining the BRI. As for why I use these BRI countries, because I think these pictures, this green area is representing more about the future of the BRI, because not all these green countries are having material significant BRI projects in their countries. However, we can expect that in the future there will be some BRI projects. And so, as we see the first map, the third map, if we put the first map above the second map, we'll have another picture, which is to show in the BRI countries how many of them are with tax treaty with China and how many are not. So I painted the BRI countries with tax treaty with China into green, and the without countries into the blue area. We have seen that the BRI countries, majority of them already had tax treaties with China, tax arrangements, but they are still like over 1/3 of 123 BRI countries still do not have tax treaty with China, and you can see very clearly that the blue areas are largely located in Africa. And using this three map, I just want to make a point that China's current double tax treaty network has been driven by the BRI to further expand And this can be mostly obviously observed in Africa. And the facts I got is like in 2018, in this year, China signed 3 new tax treaties with Gabon, the Republic of Congo, and Angola. They are all the green area. I mean, they are all BRI countries, and they are all located in Africa. So we can expect that just now most of us we consider about the BRI perspective from Europe, but maybe we should pay a little attention to also in Africa. As you can see, it's in terms of number. I mean, the colored areas, whether blue or green, they are all BRI countries. Well, this is the above is about the scope, the general picture of China's tax treaties. And now let's turn to look into the articles, the content of the tax treaties. Well, before reading the articles, I want to show you a diagram which is called the yearly number of countries signing tax treaties with China. So, well, adding together the 109 countries, the 109 tax treaty partners with China. And also I added 3 lines, blue lines. The first line is about the time spots that China joined the WTO. The second line is about the time that China had its first enterprise income tax law, first comprehensive enterprise income tax law. And third line is about the time spot that China, as I said, became a capital exporter. So, as you can see, the majority parts in the 109 countries, they are largely behind the second line, and they are also behind the first line. So, I use the lines is because I want to show you that even we don't read into the articles of tax treaties, we can imagine that. Also, if we don't consider about the BRI, China's tax treaties needs and will be updated in the future. This can be, but the BRI provides us with a window to think, to look into the changes of China tax treaties. And then this is about the content. I've observed a few signal changes. First change is about the withholding tax rates, which I found there's a trend that the withholding tax rates has been lowered in recent tax treaties, which means that for the Chinese resident companies to go out to do outbound investments in foreign countries, the source state's tax burden will be lowered. And this trend can be most obviously observed in Russia, for example. For the China-Russia tax treaty, the withholding tax rates in 1994 version treaty is around 10%. In 2014, it's got lowered to 5%. And in 2015, China and Russia signed a tax protocol to exempt totally the withholding tax on the interest. The same trend can be observed in other countries like Romania, Gabon, and Argentina. Well, and the even more interesting thing is the exemption of withholding tax for state-owned financial institutions, as referred to by the former earlier speakers. The BI projects have been largely funded by the Chinese state-owned financial institutions, and so the state-owned financial institutions, they have provided us an interesting angle to fund the implications of BRI for the change of China's tax treaties. And this exemption is relevant to the Article 4, Article 10, and Article 11, and it applies more to the interest than to the dividends. Well, and even more symbolic thing is one fund called the Silk Road Fund. The Silk Road Fund was established in 2014, which is wholly controlled and owned by the government of China, and this Silk Road Fund has been expressly exempt in the tax treaties with like Argentina, Congo, Malaysia, and Spain. So we can see this move is a clear facilitation for the construction of BRI countries in those countries. So another signal of change I want to mention is about the sparing credits. Sparing credit is one of the credit methods to eliminate the double taxation. So it has no more effects of removing double taxation. And but more importantly, it is a strong signal to say that, for example, in essence, at the source states, the sparing credits is a measure to enabling the source tax incentives to accrue to foreign investors rather than to accrue to foreign governments if the foreign governments choose a credit method as well. So normally this sparing credits has been used by the source states, especially the poor, the developing states, as a investment incentive to enhance their attractiveness to the foreign investors. But at the residence side, the world's major developing economies, they were once positive. They also adopted this article in many of their tax treaties, but but things have changed. Now most of them, they hold a negative attitude, and for the consideration of like neutrality and also the protection of the tax base. And the same trend can be observed also for China. We see that there is a trend of declining sparing credits in China's tax treaty networks. We see that before 2009 there are 49 countries in 96 tax treaties contains sparing article. But after this year, only in 2016, China's tax treaties have this article with Cambodia. And even more obviously is that normally this sparing article will contain a call it a term of valid or the expiration date. Normally it's 10 years of effectiveness. But after, as you can see, before the major part of China's tax treaty partners was signed before the new century. So over 10 years have passed, but I have seen no clues that China wishes to renew such sparing article. Well, I also want to mention a little bit about the China's MLI position. Here I only want to mention like a few articles. The first article is about the saving clause. The saving clause says that tax treaties shall not affect the taxation by a contracting jurisdiction of its own residents. So, in short, in summary, we can say this saving clause is to prevent taxpayers from circumventing its domestic anti-abuse rules. So, in effect, it is a measure to preserve the residence-based taxation. Now, for the China's tax treaties, only with the U.S. contains such an expression, and also the sparing article is it's kind of standard article for the U.S. because it taxes not only the residents but also its citizens. Well, another bundle of articles I want to mention is about the PE status, avoidance of PE status provisions in the MLI, and but China's position is to reserve. So these changes will not happen to over 100 China's tax treaties. Well, I will explain it further in the later slides. And the last article is about the mutual agreement procedure, which is a major dispute resolution procedure in the tax administration. China has agreed to change its tax treaties according to this provision of MLI, so as to strengthen and the effectiveness and efficiency of China's dispute resolution of tax administration. Well, well, there is of course an overwhelming of information, and since because of the limitation of time, I will summarize it later on. And so this is all for the treaty perspective, and then let's see the domestic perspective, see the changes of China's domestic tax laws, which is foreign related. Well, so this diagram is based on the data collected by two Chinese scholars. They collected over 200 documents issued by the Chinese central government with a clear focus of the BI. We see that before 2015, the documents are pretty rare. Sometimes, of course, this is a yearly number, a monthly number. So we see that in some months there's 0, there's 1 or 2. So it is pretty rare, the number. But after 2015, we see a clear boost of this policy making. So the policy making has been accelerated to improve the launch of the BII. So we can see that it is since 2015 rather than the time listed by the left documents issued in 2013. So even though the Chinese government claimed that its first 5 years, but we can say that before the 2015, it is kind of preparation periods for the BI. So BI is still a new. We can say that it's still a new initiative, a new project. It's not mature enough to say in which direction this initiative will go. And this also based on the same data I reprocessed. This picture is to show the frequency of the fields of policies in the over 200 documents. In the center, the biggest character is about the comprehensive, which means this policy are the most often policy which covers more than one areas of policy of area. So we see that also besides that, we also see economy is very big. Yeah, so it is consistent to its substance, its economical projects. We see economy, we see transportation, we see agriculture, you also see infrastructure, we see also the tax, of course, which is the same here. In the left, I listed 2 documents, which is quite important, overarching documents, and they issued by the SAT, the State Administration of Taxation of China. These documents both focus on improving the tax services and the tax administration for the BI. And here is, we just need to make a brief reference to it. This I listed the events that China joined, hosted in the recent years about tax, not only just focusing on the BI. But the last line of events I want want you to notice is the Belgian Root Initiative Tax Cooperation Conference hosted jointly by China and a few BI countries in Kazakhstan. So above is also the general picture, quite general picture. Let's see the material change. The first change I want to mention is about the CFC regulation. The CFC regulation, as I have observed, that the CFC regulation, the controlled foreign company regulation, has been activated and also strengthened in terms of legislation. China's CFC regulation was introduced by the Enterprise Income Tax Law in 2018, and later on was materialized in 2009, but it's still far from being perfected. There are all kinds of gaps and flaws. And due to these reasons, the CFC regulation is just lived on paper, and it has been frozen until 2014, when China's first CFC case appeared and handled by Shandong Local Tax Bureau. But things have changed rapidly. In 2014 and 2015, the China's SAT issued a circular to improve the information collection by the tax authority to enhance administration of the CFC regulation. The Chinese residents, outbound investors, need to report their information relating to foreign investments and their income gained abroad. And another major breakthrough was made by the China's individual income tax law in 2018, which is a gap that has been filled by itself. So due to these reasons, not only in the perfection of the legislation and also the enhanced administration, we see that there is also an outburst of CFC cases since 2014, as I listed below. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just the public accessed information I obtained from the internet. And well, the last point of change from the domestic perspective is the foreign tax credits, which has been improved as well. And so I directly turn to this page. This page is about well, it looks complicated, but it is not. As you can see, the red line is the new system. The blue line is the old system, which has been reformed by the red line. In the old system, we have a per country tax credits method. Well, we need to know that China is now the only a few major economies that still tax its worldwide income of its residents. So in the old system, China adopts a per country credit method, which means that the outbound Chinese residents cannot merge and utilize to the full extent of its foreign tax credit balance. But now in the new system, we introduced, we call it check the box rule. The residence company can choose either to implement the per country credits or the comprehensive credits, regardless of the different countries. And another major change is in terms of the layer of the credits. In the past, we have at most a 3-layer system, but now we have a 5-layer system. Well, it looks complicated, but in a short sentence to summarize, it is that the for the Chinese resident companies to go out, the tax burden has been lowered by this reform. Well, this is all about the overwhelming information. Well, in the last slides, I want to, well, of course, make a summary. But before we move to the summary and also draw the conclusion, I want to remind you and including myself that there still seems to be a logical gap. Is that when I was speaking about these changes, I actually don't mention pretty often about the BII. So the logical gap is, are these changes really brought out by the BII, driven by BII? Well, my answer is yes, because first of all, it is actually a public goal of the China's SAT, the State Administration of Taxation, to act, to reform proactively, to facilitate, to serve the construction of BII. So, for example, in these 2 documents, as I listed here, these documents have almost mentioned all the points I mentioned, I referred to in this change. For example, the SAT said we will broaden our tax treaty network, especially in Africa. We will lower the tax burden of residence companies go outside. And they said we will working hard to join the international tax policy making, to join the process of the development of international tax law. Well, on the other hand, we can say that remember the background that I have referred to, that it is in 2015 China has already been a net capital exporter. So I can believe that even without the consideration, without the launch of the BII, those changes will happen, maybe just later. So yeah, my question to that logic gap is yes. There's so many clear signals that it is a state level, it is a central government level to cooperate the central governments together with the local governments and different sectors, different ministries. They're working together to facilitate, to push the advance of the BII. Well, in terms of the tax changes, well, as I said, I will provide a summary. All those changes, whether in the treaty level or in the domestic level, I think they can be generally divided into 2 directions. The first direction is to removing tax barriers to facilitate the Chinese resident companies to go outside to do outbound investments. This is why we see that growing and updating tax treaties. We see that the SAT is working hard to negotiate a lower tax burden. And also we see that the improved dispute resolution and the international tax services. And even out of these slides, China's SAT has, for example, invited the foreign tax officials in the BRI countries in Africa, in the Middle East, in the Middle Europe, to invite them to come to China and let the IMF tax official, Chinese SAT official to train them, to enhance them their local tax administration. And also, from the other side, the SAT also sent the Chinese tax officials across the world to learn and to cooperate with the local officials. Another direction of efforts is China still wants to protect its tax base. So this is why we see the CFC regulation has been certainly activated and strengthened as well. We see that China has been more and more active to participate in international tax forum to combating BEPS issues. And also another wild and maybe irresponsible speculation is that China is rejected to revise its PE provisions. It is because it aims to provide more time, more room for the outbound resident companies to get used to the international tax environments. And after this summary, we can see clearly there seems to be an emergent paradigm shift of China's tax policy making. Because in short, it is a shift from source thinking to resident thinking. The resident thinking is elaborated by the SAT to encourage the resident companies to go outside, but still I want to protect my own tax base. And as for why I call it emergent, because I think this is still an ongoing historical process, an unfinished process, because now, if you remember, I mentioned that capital exports are not just in a net concept. Now China still relies pretty much on the foreign investments, especially a few days ago China issued its first foreign investment law. It's not the first foreign investment rule, but it is first foreign investment law to lead to the marketization. So, and back to the theme of this workshop is it's about the tax on digitalization. I think this even more interesting issue is that considering the developments by the OECD, the consultation documents and the three proposals by the OECD, and all these proposals lead to a concept called market tax jurisdictions. I don't see any China's reactions or stance to this new tax reform because I don't see any Chinese stakeholders their comments, no such comments. But it is pretty interesting to see that because now China is what is different, for example, from the Netherlands, from the Belgium, is that it's now becoming a capital export country. But in the meantime, it is a huge market. It's over 1.3 billion people. So in the meantime, it wants its resident companies to go outside to open up the foreign market. So combining all these factors together is pretty interesting to see China's stance. And I'm more than willing to communicate with you more in the future. Thank you.